Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. And so tonight, family, we are discussing chapter 3, Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist by Dr. Tyrene Wright. All right. And so, family, before we get started, Brother T, go ahead and introduce yourself, even though you really don't need an introduction because you're everywhere, Brother T. You're on Fly Nubian Queen.
Oh
You're on
man,
Dr. Boyce Watkins' channel. You're everywhere, Brother T. But for those who don't know who Brother T is,
hey, this is pretty amazing. But thanks everybody for coming once again this Sunday to read chapter 3. My name is Brother T. I'm from the Read Book Club. Thank Dr. Ma'at for this beautiful platform opportunity to read some awesome books. This month, we're reading Dr. Tyrene Wright, and we're jumping into the chapter, The Tuskegee Model and Africa.
yes. And so, family, take a moment out to thumb up the video, share the video. Family, sharing is caring. Let's get the information out to the people. Also, family, if you don't have the book, because I know some people say, oh, they're discussing the book. If you don't have the book, family, or if you have it and didn't read the chapter, still stay back, kick it with us, because I'm telling you, you're going to learn a whole lot during the discussion. My mother, she tunes in, Brother T, and when we have these book club discussions, and she doesn't read the books, and she
Okay.
doesn't, but she said every time that she tunes into our discussions, she walks away learning something new. And so
That's
that's
awesome.
why I always encourage my viewers to just, if you don't have the book, just listen to the discussion,
Mhm.
and you'll still walk away with something. Peace to Brother C.J. Young Jr. CJ said, how are y'all? We are beautiful and blessed, Brother CJ. CJ said, peace to the family. How you doing, brother? Let us know in the chat how you are doing. And so, Brother T, without further ado, go ahead and start it off.
Awesome, awesome. This is a beautiful chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So much I learned from this chapter. Chapter 3, the Tuskegee model in Africa. I like to start off with the heading that the authors put in because it's there for a particular purpose. And what she brings out is that Mr. Washington is not training Negroes, I'm saying Africans, to take their place in any industrial system of the South in which the white man directs or controls him. He is not training his students to be servants and come at the beck and call of any man. This chapter here describes exactly what the Tuskegee Institute was created for. It talked about Booker T. Washington and his mission to make sure he built masters of men.
Say that again, Brother T. Say that
It
again,
was
Brother T.
it was Booker T's Washington's main mission to build masters of men,
Mm.
not to be servants in anyone's industry, but be the ones, not just in the United States, but on the African continent, to be industrial leaders. So
Mm.
this chapter, that heading on chapter 3, I loved how she placed it there because it kind of set the tone of this chapter that I really definitely I'm enjoyed. And I learned something from this. I'm sure we'll go into it in a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That Booker T. Washington, he did not come up with the concept of the Tuskegee Institute, but he was the first principal,
I didn't know that either, Brother T.
which is
I didn't know
amazing,
that. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that
right?
either. Mm-hmm.
But one thing we learned in the first page was that, the first couple pages was that the person who came up with the image of having a school for his people was Lewis Adams. So we'll go into that. That set the tone for the first couple of pages. Dr.
No,
Mahat,
yeah, no, and Brother T, you're right. Lewis, let's go back. You said his name was Lewis Adams.
Lewis
But this
Adams.
is but this is what was key for me
Okay.
when we on page 36 when he started talking about the founding of Tuskegee, and great intro by the way, Brother T. But
Thank
this is what I thought about. I want to get into why Lewis Adams You know, why, the why behind that. And so it says right here at the bottom of page 36 that Booker T. Washington, like you said, was not the conceptual founder of the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial School. That person, as you stated, was a formerly enslaved man by the name of Lewis Adams. It says right here, in fulfilling a political favor for incumbent Alabama Senator W.F. Foster, Lewis was asked what form of compensation would he like for successfully galvanizing the African American voters of Tuskegee, Alabama. Lewis Adams requested a school for my people. Wait a minute, Brother T. Wait a minute now. He asked for a school. He asked for tangibles. And see, so a lot of us today in the 21st century, Brother T, will go out and vote for politicians, right, without seeking tangibles. Our ancestors didn't do that. He said, hold on, wait a minute. The senator came to him and said, look, man, I need you to galvanize the Negro vote, man. I need some voters. And he said, well, what kind of compensation would you like? Our ancestors asked for a school. They asked for land. They asked for tangibles, which is what we should be demanding of our politicians today in the 21st century. So I just wanted to put that out there, that ancestor, Lewis Adams, asked for a daggone school. We vote for you. We want a school. And so with the what the senator did once he got elected, he gave them $2,000. It was $2,000, a lot of $2,000 for salaries, right? For the school. But at that particular time, at the top of page 37, Dr. Wright tells us that there was no existing land, building, or materials to initiate the school. And so the school would need a principal. Through General Armstrong of Hampton Institute, Booker T. Washington was recommended, and then he ended up arriving at Tuskegee at the age of 26 in 1881, and he became the first principal of what they call the Negro Normal School at Tuskegee. And one thing that she drove home about Booker T. Washington is that he made Tuskegee a private school. He made it independent from the state of Alabama. And I mean, that was major back then. He said, wait a minute, we don't need that. And it said in one point in the chapter that he had endowments up to at least $1.5 million.
$1.5
million.
But let's make sure we also bring the point that he turned down the $2,000 that was allocated for the salaries, because he said, I can get this money and make the school private by doing speaking engagements, and also going out and get contributions from people who wouldn't mind contributing to it. So he took this on his shoulders, on himself, and said, hey, I can make this a private institution, which basically put more control in his hands the people and the community of Alabama.
Absolutely, Brother T. And so I love that you drove that point home. He said, man, you could keep this $2,000. I could get more. You know, that's what he basically said. I get more than this. You keep that $2,000. Like you said, I'm going to go private, so I have more control, right? I'll have more control over what happens here. So, you know, someone said in the chat, Real Talk said ahead of their time. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so
in his 20s,
right,
became a principal.
26 years of age, 26 years of age. And so then she moves the conversation into talking about how the institution, now that it was an independent entity, I'm at the top of page 38. She says that it was a school for teachers that coupled that training with various trades, skills, and vocations. It says, she says, contrary to popular belief, subjects like history and literature were taught from the time of the Institute's inception, right? And so a lot of people believe it was just a vocational school.
Yes.
The Negroes were going there to learn trades in order to be subservient to white folks. That's what he had the white philanthropists thinking, that this is going to be a school for Negroes. They're going to learn skills that will ultimately be of service to white people. That's why the white philanthropists gave him money in the first place. But Dr. Tyrene Wright said, but if you look at the curriculum, and she did her homework, talked about the breakdown of what the students took their freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. And so they took language, they had to take classes in language, mathematics, geography, history, writing, gymnastics, vocal music. They also had a class on hygiene, physiology, and hygiene. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think, astronomy. I'm looking at what else, because a lot of it was, kind of ran with each other. The liberal arts. She talked about natural philosophy, zoology, and botany, right? So we're dealing with plants. And
Mhm.
so it says the last year it was methods of teaching, civil government, zoology and botany, again, chemistry and mineralogy. I probably butchered that. Mineralogy, mental philosophy, and
Uh-huh.
etc. And so she says that if you check out Booker T. Washington's book, The Story of My Life and Works, she said it recounts the history of Tuskegee and his role and struggles as his father, first president and principal. And in it, he describes, the practical requirements for the graduates and also the curriculum. And so, again, I just want to drive home the point that you made earlier, Brother T,
Yes.
is that Tuskegee was not just a vocational, an industrial school. This was a school that was designed to make them masters of men, to
Yes.
make us independent. And see, that is the purpose of education. Dr. Amos Wilson said that the function of education, he talked about how it ensures our biological survival, and
Mhm.
it should be linked to our liberation and our sovereignty. If we're not educating our babies for the purpose, or if we're not linking their education to liberation and sovereignty, we will forever be dependent upon white people, thus subservient to white people. And see, that is what education is really supposed to do. It's supposed to liberate you.
Mhm.
Dr. John Henry Clark talked about that. Our education, we should be educating our people for power, to be the
Mhm.
managers of power, right? To amass power and to be the managers of power. And if we're not educating our babies for that, then we're miseducating our babies, which means we will continue in this perpetual cycle of being subservient to white people. I just wanted to say that, Brother T.
Most definitely. One thing we have to slow this thing down just a little bit.
Mm-hmm,
Let's
mm-hmm,
bring it
mm-hmm.
down a little bit. With that curriculum, it's stated that middle year B was equivalent to the junior year in the modern collegiate curriculum. So the second year at Tuskegee was equivalent to a junior year at a modern um, uh, collegiate curriculum. So they were advanced. Another thing that I like about their curriculum, other than everything that they used, everything that the students studied, that they took gymnastics every year. Can you imagine the intellect and the physical ability of the students? Every year they focused on the gymnastics or their fitness. Now, we think about when we're in college, we had gymnastics or gym 1 year, maybe an elective that we taken. It was required. And I wanted to stress that based off these students came out as graduates as highly trained, educated, and they was physically fit, which I think was something we can't go past because every year gymnastics was part of the curriculum.
Absolutely. And that thank you for making that point, Brother T. And I also want to, while we're on this, the curriculum, talk about the students and how the students built those first buildings at
Yes.
Tuskegee, and how the dollars that he was getting from the white philanthropists were being used to pay the students for their labor. So some of them were working for the institute, full time, and then going to school full time, or some may have been doing full time and part time. But she emphasizes
Yes, that's right.
here that
Assets.
the dollar, and I'm on page 40. She says the dollar was bound to circulate numerous times before leaving the educational and industrial community. So let's back up. I want to go
Mhm.
back to the bottom of page 39. She says, once the school was independent in 1893, it primarily aimed to produce teachers who were educated in the theory and skill of two vocations, which prepared them to teach those vocations well. What many have failed to realize about Tuskegee is that it always had a covert educational program, which promised manual laborers but delivered college educated blacks. The curriculum made Tuskegee graduates uniquely qualified to build industries, but educational institutions as well. Right? So she talks about how graduates went on to to establish their own institutions. But moving on to page 40. And Brother T, I don't know if you can see my markings. I marked page 40 and 41 up.
Same thing here.
I marked it up, Brother T, because now she's moving into their strengths. She said one of the strengths of the institution rested on its ability to survive and thrive during the nadir of in African American history in the U.S. The Tuskegee model as a self-sustaining institution produced everything from its own food to the furniture on the campus. Brother T.
Yes.
Brother T. And we sitting here, I'm going back and forth with brothers and sisters online. Right. Well, what's the solution? What's the solution? Is to study history, because if you study the history, you study our history, you'll come across a Booker T. Washington. You'll come across a Tuskegee model. All we have to do, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, family. We have models that worked. Right. So we take the models that work, we implement them today. And if we need to adjust and make modifications, then we'll do that. But T, this brother produced a model that has been tested and proven to work. So that's something we should all be striving to do right now, to build an educational institution that is self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining. Now let's look at this. Dr. Tyrene Wright started that page off on 40 with something I shared with my daughter when I was reading this chapter. It says that leave your underwear at home. We make our own at Tuskegee. This man was saying at this time is that from the rootin' to the tootin', they do from the, not just from production, they make sure they come to a finished product. And she stressed in this chapter as well that all students, unlike most collegiate students, not just theoretical, not understand how it works, but you had to possess the ability to build it from the start to the finish, and not just do that, but teach others how the process works. This man took a lot of thought in making sure that, once again, they were masters of their industry. And as we'll see, people took this model and also enacted it to create it on the continent as well.
Absolutely. And Brother T, I just want to go back to this because, I'm at a HBCU. And so I just want to drive home the point that this brother created a self-sustaining educational institution where the students could work for the institution, right? Yes. So now we're lending our labor. We're not exporting our labor to white folks, right? We are lending our labor to each other, right? Dr. Tyrene Wright calls it nation building and nation management. And so literally we were at Tuskegee University building for our people, laboring for our people, producing for our people, right? We're not even doing that today, brother. This brother was doing this in the late 1800s.
Right.
It's 2022, and we aren't doing this today. And we walking around talking about we're the solutions. The solution is right here. It's in our history. We have a model. We have models, family, that have been produced for us. As someone said, Real Talk said, the blueprint. We have blueprints. We just have to implement them.
Say it again.
We have. Go ahead.
This chapter highlighted all those points. We live in a society today that our zip code has citizens in them. And you look at the age from 18 to 25, we use our city of Baltimore as an example. And you understand through that age, after graduation of high school and the entering of some trade school or maybe college, you have somehow students who not able to finish high school or gain a trade or enter into school. One thing that was stressed on page 40 is that another strength of the institution was its ability to make anyone an asset to his or her community and people.
Say it again, Brother T. I didn't hear you.
It says that another strength of the institution was its ability to make anyone an asset to his or her community and people.
Brother T.
This institution did not just build students, they employed the students.
Come on.
They went to school during the day and or worked at night or vice versa. The first year I believe they worked part-time and went to school at night. Then after that, they went to school full-time and worked part-time. The point was that he made sure that they had ability to get the education and get paid to take care of their daily life. This rejuvenated the community. In Baltimore, once again, I live near Morgan. I went to Coppin. These are on two areas in the Black community. And like, once again, we have our communities with HBCUs and other universities that can utilize this model. There will be no 18 to 25-year-old Black men or women who have no skills if this was implemented today.
Come on, T. Hit the button, T. Hit the button. There you go. I had to hit the button on you, T, for that one. Because that's so real, Brother T, that we don't. You see, first of all, the brother made the institution independent.
Right.
I want to back up and say that a lot of our HBCUs that we run around, and I'm an HBCU grad, right? Proud of it. We're HBCU grads. But can we be honest? Can we have an honest conversation? A lot of our HBCUs rely on funding of the state.
That's right. Funding
from the state. A lot of them. Now, Howard, I know Howard is a private university. She said in the book that Tuskegee is still private somewhat, but they do get some money from the state. But Booker T. Washington made sure that his institution was independent and that he had enough money or could raise enough money to keep it going. Then, like you said, Brother T, he made sure that the students, that all of the money that he raised was circulated within the system, the educational system that he created. And so the students worked for the school, right? They built things and produced things for the school, for each other, for that community, right? Then the strength that you just said, he made the institution, another strength of the institution was its ability to make anyone an asset to his or her community and people. So that was primary to say, I'm going to bring someone, I could bring anyone into my institution and guarantee that I'll develop them in such a way that they will be an asset to their community and their people. So let me show you what went viral, Brother T, a few days ago. And you see, I got thousands of views on this, and some people were really mad at me when I said this. But I asked the question, what are we graduating? That was the question I posed. And if you look at the bottom, I said, we are graduating Black-skinned youth with white minds who will advance the interests of white people. People got upset with me for saying that. And the reason that what prompted me to say that, Brother T, is that I'm looking on social media and I see a lot of parents, and shout out to those parents and students who did graduate, right? Who did go to the program, because all they're doing is following the blueprint we laid. So we tell them go to school. Our baby said, all right, I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna get this diploma for mama and dad and I'm gonna bring it back to the village. But my question became, what are we graduating? Because even within my own family, I see this desire to they graduate, and it's not a desire to be an asset to us, it's a desire to be a laborer for them. So I actually had this, I put up this clip and I'm going to play it for you, family. It's no like rewinding it, so I'm going to play it so that you can hear it. But Brother T, I posed the question, what are we graduating? So here we go. Hold on. Oh, it's not playing? Oh, I have interest. I want to say that again, Papa. What are we graduating, right? And that's what I was thinking when I saw the pictures of different people. And I said, typically what we're graduating and what I'm seeing, Baba, is, a group of young Black people who are operating with the European consciousness, who go out in the world and who have be graduated. Everybody in cap and gowns and we all smiling. We're in the picture smiling. And I was just thinking to myself, Baba, when I looked at these pictures, I was happy for the parents and, them feeling good and feeling, the children feeling like I accomplished something. But the question popped in my mind, what are we graduating? What are we graduating? So when our children graduate, who have they become? And essentially what we are graduating is a group of Eurocentric minded, black skinned people, right? Who go out in the world and who advance white interests. I want to say that again, Papa. What are we graduating, right? And that's what I was thinking when I saw the pictures of different people. And I said, typically what we're graduating and what I'm seeing, Baba, is, a group of young black people who are operating with the European consciousness, who go out in the world and who would be graduating. All right, and so Brother T, that was the clip, and it went viral. I mean, I don't even know if you saw the blue check on there, but one of the young quarterback from Minnesota Vikings, Kellen Mond, he put 100 on it. But that's what we're graduating. And so what I applaud about Booker T. Washington is saying, no. I'm going to the people who come to me, the students who come to me, I'm going to develop them in such a way that they become an asset to his or her community and people. And that should always be the objective. If we're going to send our children to school to be doctors and lawyers and scientists and mathematicians and engineers, then they need to be doctors, lawyers, mathematicians, scientists, even business people for our people. Not for them, not to advance white interests and to maintain racism and white supremacy, but to liberate us and to be these people for us. Okay. And so, because so what I know about black folks is we will sit here, Brother T, and complain about racism, white supremacy all day, and then go and work and maintain it. And then not only do we work to maintain the system, but then we train up our children to work and maintain the system. Right. But go ahead, Brother T.
One of the things, and you're absolutely right. And that point brought a lot of this chapter home, because he had in mind that even if the students left Tuskegee, that you need to go somewhere in the U.S. and build the same thing in that city. He definitely stressed that he didn't like the fact if Africans came to Tuskegee and did not go back to the continent and bring these lessons to life. But he did share in this chapter. Dr. Tyrene Wright shared some examples of that happening. But I wanted to go to page 41, because this is the introduction of Dr. Carver.
George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver. This man, as we all know, made many inventions from the peanut. What I didn't know, he also made inventions from the peanut, the tomato, and the sweet potato. Also, he was real pivotal in getting contributions sent to the school. He was asked to come to the school by Booker T. Even though they couldn't afford him at the time, he came on, changed the whole agricultural department, and he also contributed to it by giving lectures and getting contributions abroad. So it's one thing that I didn't want to not mention Dr. Carver and all the things that he brought to the school as well. This is when we found out in this chapter, later on in the chapter, that how much they raised. President William Taft urging him to arrange communication with Mr. Farrell, who he felt may become interested in enlarging our endowment. It was now $1.5 million out that they made, but it ought to be $4 million. So they believe, hey, we raised 1.5, but now it's time to get some more contributions in the house, because in order to make this thing run, we need $4 million. But let's bring attention to, this is around 1910. This is the early 1900s that they were raising this type of money. And they were so dedicated that they made the rounds, not by the internet, not by YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. They got on horse or buggy or trained to make this thing happen. They went around and they got on stage. They gave speeches and they asked for money, and he made it happen. And to make sure that the students knew how to make things from the beginning to the end. And I applaud that, because I never knew the detail. That's why it's always great to read books like this. And she expressed and showed us exactly how hard it was. Can you imagine raising $4 million in the early 1900s?
No.
So this man had to go out and do what he had to do, but because he did that, people chastised him and called him Uncle Tom.
Yes, they did.
But this man was building a covert operation, and it even stated that later on in the chapter by one of the people who wrote about Booker T. And he said, man, this is a covert operation. This man's not using these students in order to enhance the whites in this country. He's sending these blacks abroad. And there's examples of that when he's sent to the Togo, which we'll learn later in chapter 4. But he also sent to Liberia, which I have a connection to based off lineage of my father. So I wanted to share some things. But before Liberia, he sent someone from South Africa came and learned from Booker T and took that back to Booker T, as well as Liberia. If I can I share that right now?
Please do, Brother T.
Okay, so let me go ahead and get that. Okay, cool. So we have South Africa. The South African person who came over and talked and met with Booker T was John Dube. His last name is spelled D-U-B-E. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He was the first school in South Africa. It was started by a black person. John Dube was the first president of what became the ANC, the African National Congress, which we learned about the African National Conference from what Booker T was talking to Monroe. Not Monroe. Who you talked to last time about the first African National Conference? That was, do you remember the person he was talking to?
No, Brother T, not all.
Okay. Well, okay. So anyway, John Dube became the president of the first ANC, which became the African National Conference. That school in South Africa was chosen by President Nelson Mandela as the place where he would cast his first vote in the first racially inclusive election in South Africa in 1994. So I wanted to see if that school was still in existence, or I wanted to hear some more history about once I learned about it in this chapter. And so Booker T did not just motivate U.S. students; he also motivated African students abroad. One of the people that came was John Dube, and John Dube started the school. And the significance of the school, the first black school, started in South Africa. And I wanted to make sure I bring the point when I was looking that up. President Nelson Mandela placed his first vote there when it became racially inclusive election in South Africa. So that to me is monumental, because once again, we've shown how Booker T influenced not just students here in America, but abroad. Then I want to go to Liberia, if I can.
Please do.
Okay, so Booker T. Washington Institute is a public post-secondary school in Kakata, Majabe County in Liberia, founded in 1929 as Booker T. Washington Agricultural and Industrial Institute. It's the first school of its kind in that country. Okay. There was a MIT graduate by the name of Robert Taylor who designed the campus there. Now, the Liberian president, Charles D.B. King, he visited the United States and he toured Tuskegee to get some information, to see and talk and learn about the Tuskegee experiment here. And then he went to Robert R. Taylor, who's an MIT graduate, and they drew up the plans, along with sponsorships from the Phelps Stokes Fund, the Liberian government, and Firestone Rubber Corporation. They received 1,000 acres in Liberia to build this school. And so when I felt that, I had to look for more information to come up with this, just to see if these institutions were still standing today. I wanted to see if they were still functioning, and so looking that up on the MIT website of Black History, it talked about Mr. Robert R. Taylor, who received an honorary doctorate at Lincoln University, which is in Pennsylvania, at HBCU in Pennsylvania. I think that's the first HBCU that became a university. But I just wanted to share that Booker T. Washington, he asked that U.S. students go elsewhere in the U.S. and start this model, but he also demanded that Africans to go back to the continent and start institutions. This is what I was saying, that he does not just want leaders of the industry, but he wants you to also teach others how to replicate this.
Each one teach one. Each one teach one.
And I wanted to share this dollar because in Liberia, the biggest rubber plantation was in Liberia in 1926, and they had it on it. If you can see that, if you let me put me on the screen. Right there, Dr. Mott, you see the brother,
yes,
with the rubber tree.
Yes.
So they was known in Liberia for rubber, and once I said that school would have produced, with the partnership, unfortunately, from Firestone. That means they benefited. So they didn't get a chance to run the industry, but they had an industry, unfortunately, come in and reap the benefits of having the largest rubber plantation on their country. So unfortunately, just like the Togo and in South Africa, industry came in, and we could have controlled that industry, but unfortunately, by other means that I don't know, we didn't. But just showing you that the agricultural school was there, it was placed there, and at least the seed was planted.
No, absolutely. The seed was planted, and I like that you're tying it all back. I hear echo, Brother T, when I talk. I'm sorry. Let me real fast. But just like you said, Brother T, the seed was planted, and it all went back to our beloved ancestor, Booker T. Washington. And I just want to add to something that you said. You said not only did he wanted U.S. students or graduates to implement the Tuskegee model here in the U.S. You mentioned that, and you also mentioned the African students going back to the continent and implementing the model there as well. I want to just add that he also sent American graduates over there to assist with the implementation of the Tuskegee model. I wanted to add that. I also wanted to go back to something you said earlier when you talked about Booker T. Washington's desire for his graduates. Before they leave out, they got to demonstrate that they can put the theory in practice. So yes, we teach you the theory, but you had to demonstrate that you can actually take the theory and produce something. See, our children will come out of school learning that C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared, but can you take that equation and go build something with it? See, our engineering students at Morgan, they'll leave out knowing Ohm's law, V is equal to I times R, voltage is equal to the current through the resistor times the resistance itself. That's the voltage. So you know Ohm's law or Kirchhoff's laws or all of these different laws, Newton laws. But can you take these laws? Can you take all of this theory that you've learned over the years and actually build something? And see, that's what I see right now. People, a lot of these students who come out of high school, Brother T, couldn't even change a tire on a car. But we're walking around, Brother T. Hold on, Brother T. Look, we're walking around talking about how educated we are. A lot of us have fancy degrees and can't sew a button on a shirt. A lot of us have fancy degrees and we can't make our own clothes. We can't grow our own food, right? We can't take the laws and the theory and go and build our own. So how educated are you if you can't build for yourself? If you can't produce for yourself, that's not education. And so for me, this chapter really drove home the purpose of education. And the purpose of an educated person, the purpose of education is independence. It is self-sustainability. It does include pride, race pride, self-pride. It does include economic independence. If you don't have this stuff, what the hell are you running around here congratulating people with these diplomas for? I'm just curious, Brother T. Like what are we doing? What are we really applauding here? We're applauding, the continuation of European domination. That's what we're applauding. So I wanted to go there. And I also wanted to go to page 42. So I want to go back a little bit where she break down what Tuskegee really was. Right. Okay. And so she begins at the bottom of page 41. And she said that a guy named Arthur Evans, who was the staff correspondent for the Chicago Record-Herald, wrote an article entitled Working Out the Race Problem in his paper, which was later republished in the Tuskegee Student, the local paper produced by the institution. Wait a minute, brother. They had their own daggone paper. Right. I mean, so not only were they building everything that producing what they consume, they even had their own paper. So anyway, she goes on to say that she says in it, he writes, one of the unique desire in inner workings of Tuskegee that resembled an independent industrial city instead of a school. Pause. It was an it says right here that Tuskegee resembled an independent industrial city instead of a school. So it says a school. Tuskegee is not a school in the ordinary sense of the word. It's a city in itself, a community that dominates a whole country. It's a great industrial plant with 40 trades and industries that consumes all of its own products. Wait a minute. It sounds like Dr. Amos Wilson, sounds like Dr. Claude Anderson, that industries that consumes all of its own products, that erects its own buildings, first making its own bricks, that grows its own food, makes its own clothes, writes and prints its own textbooks, all by way of education. Then she goes on to say, Brother T, Tuskegee, a self-sustaining model, produced most of the human necessities for man, woman, and child. The students were taught blacksmithing, carpentry, brick masonry, brick making, plastering, farming, stock, poultry, bee raising, sawmilling, wheel writing, printing, mattress and cabinet making, sewing, cutting and fitting, washing and ironing, cooking, and general housekeeping. This was a programmatic aversion to the production of mere raw materials. So hold on. He was teaching our babies how to take raw materials and produce something. So it says students were trained to produce finished products. On Founders Day and during convocation, students showcased their final finished products for visitors to the campus. Academically, students were not merely measured by credit hours. Wait a minute, Brother T. So hold on. During convocation, see, nowadays at HBCUs, when we go to convocations, we just sit there and we listen to the president and the dean talk. At their convocation, they had to show the visitors what they produced. So it wasn't a bunch of fancy talks and we all walking around with the big puffy gowns. They were actually, because I'm telling you what happens at convocation. Everybody got on the hat and the big puffy gowns looking like British folks. But anyway, we have on the big puffy gowns and we sit there and we give the children fancy speeches and all of this stuff. At their convocation, his students had to demonstrate and show off things that they produced. And then she moves on to say that they were not merely measured by credit hours, but by the ability to demonstrate and produce a finished product. So it wasn't about, they got to make sure they recite Ohm's law back to me or Kirchhoff's law back to me. They had to take those laws and go and produce something. And that was a part of assessing a student, because see, nowadays, the way the educational system assesses our babies is that we measure them based on their ability to regurgitate things that they're taught, things that's said to them. We don't measure them on their ability to take the information that they're taught and go and produce something. We sit there and reward them for parroting. Oh, if you parrot the best, you have a 4.0. If you don't parrot the best, you may have a 2.0. And that's exactly what happened to some of our students who went to go out and work for Apple. They sent some of our students to go work for Apple, and they sent the students with the highest GPAs to Apple. You know what Apple sent back and said? They said, don't send us another one of your students because they can't think and they can't problem solve. That's what Apple said, T. Don't send us another student because we noticed that your students cannot think and problem solve, meaning that they can't apply the theory that they've been learning. But that's because we measure them and reward them based on their ability to parrot, not based on their ability to produce. So I love that she says right here, academically, students were not measured merely by credit hours, but by the ability to demonstrate and produce a finished product, be it a dress, wagon, mattress, sawmill, or printed publication. Washington's doctrine and the Tuskegee model highlighted the importance of producing what was consumed. So it says, on a very basic level, the Tuskegee program attempted to cultivate an industrial class of people that produced rather than consume. See, that's what Tuskegee was really about.
Right.
Cultivating up a generation of people who could produce all that they needed and all that they desired to consume. That's what Tuskegee was about. And I just want to plug this. A huge part of his program was character building. Hold on, T.
Yes.
Hold on, T. I have the book. Where's my book? It's over here. It's over here behind me, and I'll get it. He had a book out, Booker T. Washington. There's a book called Character Building, which was a compilation of his weekly addresses. So he had weekly addresses. He gave weekly addresses to the students there to focus on character. Remember Dr. King, when he was at Morehouse, Dr. King said the true goal of education is the cultivation of intelligence plus character. So we can't truly educate our babies. You can't walk around and say you truly are educated and you're walking around with piss poor character. So Booker T. Washington placed a strong emphasis on character building, so much so that he met with his students weekly when he was in town to focus on character. So I wanted to plug that, Brother T. That you want to get in.
Let me tell you something. That was on fire. Because you stressed everything I wanted to say. Once again. But it had to be said, and only you could say it. As eloquently as you always do. But you, one thing that I wanted to piggyback on was the character building. This is what I believe is the quote of the chapter, in my opinion.
Come on.
It says that, and this is on page 43 for those who have the book. This is before we get to exporting Tuskegee.
I have it underlined.
We have here Tuskegee and its people echoed Washington's doctrine. There can be no liberty without intelligence, no independence without industry, and no power for man and charm for women without character.
Hit the button.
You know what I'm saying? We have to understand that this man understood you have to have character. So you have business moguls like Henry Ford that said that, the big business is about shaving cost. When you just have a capitalistic mindset and not a people building or nation building mindset, you want to get rid of the people. You understand that it's about people who just are consumers, but you're going to knock off the people who also produce, because as a big business person, you want to think about your bottom line. But what Booker T. Washington was doing with his students, making them industry leaders.
Come on.
And understanding how to make things from the raw form to the finished form. But in order to make sure that we just not teach business, understand how to create business and industry, but I need you to have character, moral character, because that is what he says is the intelligence and charm of the man and woman. So we have to be mindful that you have to be very intelligent, very charming, as we know most of the people that we look in business are, but we know them to be cutthroat and lack moral character. He made sure it was something that he put into them every week when he touched Tuskegee, and I think that's an important quote, and I had to repeat it.
No, Brother T, I'm glad that you did, because like you said, that was a very, very important quote. And that's something, man, when you talk about character building, we had to do it in the home. And like you said, when we send our babies into in educational, it need to be in educational institutions that we own and control. And emphasis has to be placed on character. It's so many different quotes that I could bring up. I'm sitting here thinking about things that Minister Farrakhan talked about, Dr. Malana Karanga, and so many others. Even W.E.B. Du Bois talked about the importance of character and making sure that that is a huge part in the education of our babies. We have to understand that. And so, Brother T, you already really broke down pages 44 and 45, where he talked about like exporting the Tuskegee model to South Africa and Liberia. So I'm gonna go bypass that and then move into the last part of this chapter at the bottom of page 46, the problem with Tuskegee's appeal.
Okay, right.
And so with this one, she mentions on here that she says, unfortunately, the Tuskegee model also appealed to racists in colonial Africa and the U.S. The term Tuskegee model for development referred not only to industrial education, but to the general policy of Black development associated with Washington and his institute, namely, in the submission to duly constituted white authority. And it says, and while Washington's position was largely misunderstood, it explains the inevitable appeal to colonial administrators and missionaries in Africa, as well as white Americans who had the desire to duplicate the model for their own use. So basically, when I bring Dr. Wright back on and we had this dialogue with her, I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but I'm just trying to make it. And I want to see if you understand, if your interpretation of what I just read is the same. Essentially, it seems like, Brother T, that she's saying that, in white folks' mind, they were like, we could use this model for our benefit. Right. And, and so Booker T, in order to get the white dollars, had to put on the mask that, hey, you give me these dollars, I'm going to create this school that's going to develop, it's going to develop these Black students with skills to bring back to you and your community, and you all can capitalize off of these skills or use them as you wish. It seems like that was the mask that he wore, right? But we already know deep down inside that wasn't what it really was. But she's saying that it had that appeal to the colonial administrators and missionaries in Africa. They saying, hey, we could use this model and get rich, off of this model. Go ahead, Brother T.
Well, that's why I stressed, and when it came down to Firestone and Liberia, is basically a white industry coming in and saying, hey, you already prepped us, already prepped the African workers. You use the Tuskegee experiment by getting motivation for that agricultural school. Hey, they have rubber trees. We can come in, not just help them. We're not going to help them by giving them this industry, make them control it. We're going to come in and hire them as workers. So unfortunately, it couldn't be used. This is an example of white industry coming in and saying, hey, we can benefit from this model.
Isn't that what they always do, Brother T?
They always do. You have to have a strong hand, but the intentions were for them not to. But I understand the schools still stand. And guess what? Firestone, I believe, is no longer there. So they left them with the school, but not the industry. So it's a lesson that we can learn from that as well. That, you know, when we do something, we have to stay 100% independent so we can make sure it serves the best interest of the people,
That's
not
right.
the industry. So because they'll come out when they don't see the profit. One thing about business that we have to understand is the profit and the ability to have workers work for what you're going to pay them for. So, and not in that sentence that I mentioned anything about the self-interest of the people.
No, absolutely. Hit the button for you on that one. You had to hit the button on that one, T, for yourself. You had to hit the button on that, T. That was, and see, and that's what, you know, she talked about the problem with that appeal.
Yeah.
You know, they was like, we can use this, we can export this to Africa and use this and capitalize off of it. And he's already training them up. You know, we can use this. And so she moves on to talk about Thomas Dixon. And by the way, brother T,
Yes.
brother Shimsu, peace to you, brother Shimsu Netcha. He put Henry Sylvester. Let me go back up. I think
Yes.
the name you were looking for was Sylvester, right? Henry.
Yes. Henry Sylvester, that was the first person in the African conference.
Right. That's what.
Talked to Booker T, and he started in London, and Booker T helped him. Okay, that's what. Yes, that's
Yeah,
what I was
yeah,
mentioning.
that's what he
Thank
was
you so
looking for.
much.
Yeah, he said Henry
Mhm.
Sylvester Williams, part of
Yep.
First African Congress.
Thank you,
So
brother.
that's what he was talking about. So she moves on to talk about Thomas Dixon and saying that he went even further to suggest, and she said this guy was a racist, an overt racist, and
Mhm.
so he's a Southern racist, okay. And she said that he suggested that the Tuskegee model be exported to Liberia. And he said, well, look, instead of spending money to educate the African population in America, the U.S. should send them back to Liberia, right, for the equal cost or less. Just send them, instead of we sending out 800,000, because he said right here, we've spent about 800,000 on Negro education since the war. You know, he said half of this sum would have been sufficient to have made Liberia a rich and powerful Negro state. So he's saying just send them back to Africa instead of paying money to educate them here. And so she drives home that the idea of returning the African population in America back to Africa was not a new concept. She says clearly the American Colonization Society had already implemented it. You know,
Yes.
however, colonial administrators in Togo and the Americas seeking to establish wealth in Africa had something very different in mind. And so she concludes this page with saying that the Togo expedition in the Sudan, although different in important ways, are two examples of white administrators and venture capitalists' desire to use the Tuskegee model. The idea that the model also endorsed Black acquiescence to white oppression also explained why white philanthropists endorsed, employed, and even embraced the Tuskegee model. And so when I say, Brother T, that he wore that face and that man wore it well, he
Yeah.
wore the face. And so now look, and today we say today we still people still believe that he was an Uncle Tom
Let me
or
tell you
in
something.
a Sambo, but he wasn't. He wasn't. He wore a face, he wore a mask, no different than when some of us go to work, Brother T. We wear a mask too. You go on a job, and some people go, they dress up. We speak a different dialect when we get around white people. Your voice gets higher, and you turn. But he wore his mask for the liberation and sovereignty of African people. You wearing your mask for a paycheck, right? And running
Right.
around here calling him a Sambo and an Uncle Tom, right?
That's right.
But this man wore a mask to move the way he needed to move in order to accomplish the goals that he set forth for himself and for his people. Go ahead, Brother T. I think you wanted to say
Which
something.
was a powerful decoy. It reminds me of when you was mentioning this. It reminds me of a black exploitation movie that was banned. Um, the book was banned. It was later made into a movie. It was called The Spook Who Sat by
Sat
the
by the door.
Door.
Come on, T.
He had to do what he had to do because his whole mission from the beginning was to take this information back to his community and become revolutionaries and take over. Wasn't this the same thing that Booker T did? He always had a mind for Africa because of his mother. And his mind took him to understand how Africa works and what worked and what didn't work. So when he got of the right age of 26, he put things in motion. He was the spook who sat by the door.
Mm.
He educated. He went on and be a decoy. The brother in spook who sat by the door played decoy for the CIA. Got everything he needed to learn. Got the money, got the understanding, took it back and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. Okay, it wasn't as graphic as that movie, but think about how powerful his message and his duty to his people was. I think so far in chapter 3, Dr. Tyrene Wright has proven, and without a doubt, that Booker T. Washington was definitely a Pan-Africanist.
Hit the button, T. Hit the button. Without a doubt. I mean, it's no doubt in my mind. And even when I mentioned that we were going to be reading this book, some elders, made a few comments on Facebook, and I said, well, did you read the sister's book? Oh no, I ain't read the book, but I already did my research on this. Sister has read 15 volumes, 300 pages each, so 4,500 pages of Booker T. Washington's handwritten notes. And so this sister, I think that she is definitely qualified, more than qualified to make a decision on whether or not this brother Booker T. Washington, our beloved ancestor, was a Sambo or Uncle Tom or accommodationist or a Pan-Africanist or a revolutionary. And to me, I would throw him in that category, a Pan-Africanist, a revolutionary, because look at what he did, Brother T, during that time. This is the late 1800s in Alabama, Brother T.
Yeah.
I just talked about this on Instagram the day before yesterday, just understanding historical context. When we judge our ancestors, we really have to understand historical context and what it is, meaning what was the cultural and political and social, things or environment that certain ideas and people, where they existed. We got to understand that context in which they were operating. This was the late 1800s, Brother T. You figure Emancipation Proclamation was just signed in 1863. 1863. And he's in the belly of the beast. He's in the South. Because remember, the Great Migration, people started leaving out. The bulk of us started leaving around 1915. Remember, right. 1915 to 1970, when right. the bulk of us started moving out of the South. So this is 1881 when he first got to Tuskegee. So this is slavery was just 18 years ago, less than 2 decades ago. And he built a self-sustaining community in the belly of the beast, Brother T. Right. So he had to wear a mask and he had to play the game. This is chess. This ain't checkers. That's right. So he had to play the game. And I can say that Booker T. Washington played the game, Brother T, and he played it well. And yes. he accomplished what some of us have never and will never accomplish. Hopefully we will, hopefully we, this conversation will spark some minds to build and create some things. But what I'm saying is a lot of us who had these criticisms of him hadn't accomplished what this man accomplished at all. Isn't even working on it, Brother T. Right. But we walking around with these negative things that we saying about Booker T. Washington. So anyway, this sister, I tip my hat off to her, Brother T. I think that she did a wonderful, wonderful job, just really defending who Booker T. Washington is, not was, because we should always speak of our ancestors in present tense, because our ancestors are always, we say, omnipresent. And so who he is and what we need to do, Brother T, is take the model. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Right. Take the model that he left for us, that was proven to work, implement it today, and export it around the world. That's all we need to do, Brother T. That's all we need to do. Brothers and sisters arguing online. What's the solutions, Dr. Ahmad? The solution is the Tuskegee model. Right. The solution is blueprint for Black power. The solution is powernomics. See, our predecessors have been giving us solutions. We just got to take the solutions and implement them.
On a basic level, as a student, he taught, create what you consume. And we have to get on that level mentally. We consume. Remember how to sell to the Negro. Buying power. Nothing in that sense talked about us creating what we consume on all levels. This man made from the clothing to the bricks.
Mm.
He did everything. He made sure that everything that community needed in the real sense went through the whole community. Money went through the whole community before it left Tuskegee, because he created everything from the beginning to the end. And this is something that we have to look at, study, and reproduce.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Brother Richard Sheffield said a brother wanted to chastise me for challenging the ineffective history of HBCUs, pointed to the 49,000 grads. He said, I told him those 49K can't keep one light bulb. You know what, Brother Richard? I can't. Brother Richard said, I told him the 49K can't keep one light bulb on anywhere in America. But the sad part is, Brother T, it's the truth. You know what's sad? We had a at our university, we established an engineering program in 1984. We had to fight the state for it. And peace be upon my dean who did. He fought the state for, the engineering program. His goal, his vision. And he actually left Howard to come to our university to start the school of engineering. And so his vision was to produce Black engineers. That's what he said. I want to just produce Black engineers. I want to get Blacks in STEM, and I want to produce an abundance of Black engineers. And that was in 1984. And as I've expressed in faculty meetings, we need to take that vision to another level, right? Not only produce Black engineers,
right,
but produce Black engineers who will go on to produce the technology that we need in order to build and maintain a nation. See, we got to take it to another level, Brother T. And so, I'm sitting here thinking about what this brother said, and I can't help but to say he's right. A lot of our students, when they leave us, they can't produce anything.
Not taught.
Not that they can't, but they're not, like you said, taught to produce anything. They leave with these theories and with, some things, but in order to produce, like, hey, build your own computer. Since we use computers and we're engineers, right? We should be able to manufacture our own computers. Where's our Black Silicon Valley?
Right.
Since we've been graduating engineers since 1984, that means we've been graduating engineers, pumping out thousands of engineers for the past 40 years. Where is our Black Silicon Valley, where we're producing our own electronics, our own, computers, mics, cell phones, right? Our own cell phones, microphones, keyboards, right? Yeah. Where is it, Brother T? So that brother Richard is 100% correct. I agree 100% with him. They have been very ineffective. Very.
We only got to the point that we could put our name, logo on the product after it's created. And then we say this is ours. Yep. We only got to that point. We have to learn how to do everything. We have to. This new age makes it. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is a something off subject, just a little. We think about the iPhone that millions of people have in their possession. The iPhone allowed one thing to happen: the ability to update and continue to update every so often. But one thing that made the iPhone great was the ability of apps. The apps continue to make the phone smarter by adding more functions, more abilities. People start to realize, hey, let me create an app. But in the same token, learn how to create the apps that's needed for the phone, but learn how to use and make the phone as well. Not just how the phone works, but the actual ability to make the phones down from the root to the tooth. We got to understand that concept. But I think that the app thing was at least one component of the phone, but the ability and the brilliance of Apple was the ability to make a phone that was self-sustaining. Keep that phone, older models, and you just keep it updating. And you had apps that increased the value of the phone, no matter what serious it really is. It's the model of saying, let's keep this in their pocket and keep them coming back. But what we need to learn from that situation is that this one thing. We need to learn how to create industry that we can benefit from, not just consume. Because everyone has an iPhone in their possession, but we don't know how it works. We don't know how we can get into it. And they're only letting limited amount of people get into the app industry to benefit from it. So we're only getting one door instead of controlling the whole industry. This is what we have to take. Before someone asks you again, Dr. Mahat, what's the solution? Tell them, give them an iPhone. Tell them to figure that out. Sorry.
Hit the button, T. Hit the button.
I'm just saying.
Peace to Dr. Tyrene Wright. She's in the building. She said, hey, Dr. Mahat, I'm up here. I'm up in here. I didn't want to miss this week's discussion. Queen, I just text you the link. And if you could close us out with some words, we would love to hear from you. If you want to come on in, Dr. Wright, and tell us what do you want us to take away from chapter 3, Dr. Wright? That would be a beautiful closeout.
Yes.
If you could come on in, Dr. Wright, and tell us, what do you want readers to take away from chapter 3? So I just sent you the link. I just texted to you on your phone, Dr. Wright. And so if you could come on in, I know I'm kind of catching you off guard. She probably said, hey, I was just saying hi. She probably said, I was just saying hi, but, now you want me to come on in and say a few words. Oh, there she is. There she is. Hold on. Let me add her to the stream.
Hey, Dr. Mahat.
Peace and love to you, Dr. Wright. How are you?
Hello, Dr. Wright.
I'm well. I'm out. And I chimed in because I didn't want to miss it. And I remembered while out. So.
Awesome.
No, thank you. I appreciate you chiming in and commenting in the chat. People said Dr. Wright wrote an amazing book and explained in totality what our ancestors constructed for the true liberation of DNA African peoples in America and on the continent. So they love your book. We love it, Dr. Wright, and we thank you for just this information that you're bringing to the community, that you brought to the community, Doc. So if you could close us out with what you wanted us to take away from chapter 3. What did you want us when we read it and we dissected it? Brother T and I, we went page for page, okay? But what do you, Dr. Wright, want readers to take away from chapter 3, the Tuskegee model?
Okay, so thank you. So let me just say this. Thank you for even letting me chime in all late, Dr. Ma. And thank you. I saw last week's session and I wasn't able to chime in because I was once again out and around. So, and not in a quiet place. So thank you. I'm just so impressed with the comments and your discourse, you and Brother T's discourse on it, because you actually are getting it. You got all the points that I was seeking to convey in all the last chapters and this chapter as well. I wasn't in the live when you opened up the session, so I don't know how you received the initial quote that I opened the book up with with Thomas Dixon. And that was a little controversial because in a previous work long before this book, I used that. And there was a little criticism, like, how are you going to use some white supremacist commentary on what Tuskegee was? But that's just what scholarship is all about, meaning that this is what was put out there. This was what was written at that time. Right, in real time during Booker T. Washington's time. And so my question was it true? Let's investigate. Let's qualify it. Was it a lie? Was it Dixon's propaganda? Or was there any truth in it? And I think that's how we should deal with all criticism. Is there any truth in it? And proceed that way. Because if we can find any truth in it, then we need to deal with that. And then if you can't find any truth in it, then it's a lie and you debunk it or dispel it. And so, but then there were other voices, as you saw throughout the chapter, right? About people critiquing Tuskegee and hitting it right on the head in terms of what Tuskegee was up to and what Washington was doing at Tuskegee, which is that it was a sustainable industrial community, more so than an industrial school. It was a sustainable industrial community where the people who were studying to be teachers, not just of the academics, but of industry, were producing people who could go out and do the same and essentially replicate that over and over and again. And so Washington is very much involved in trying to export this perfected model to the African continent. And those are some real basic things in terms of understanding. Once you have something good, right? What do you do with it? Once you have perfected something, what do you do with it? You share it with the people you love most. That's what you do. And so he sought to share that with the African world. And I think in the end of the book, I actually share one of his speeches at the International Conference on the Negro, where he talks about all the industries that are opened up and how it is part of Tuskegee's mission, sacred mission, to share for the students and then graduates to share what they learn at Tuskegee in their respective communities. And so that those were the key and most important things. And just what you both have been saying, this concept of independence through industry is Washington's particular brand of addressing our condition, not just in America, but globally, because when he applies this to Africa, he knows what it will mean for those on the continent who are in the majority. Capturing industry, owning industry means nationhood on the continent, right? The colonial masters can no longer use those locales as extraction sites because the industries will be in the hands of the people. And so he knows that that is a particular plus for, African nationalism on the continent of Africa. But you got all the main points. He could have been theorizing or prophetizing about religious ideology in the chapel there, but he chose to talk about character, which is distinctively African, right? That is distinctively African when you go into our cultural context, and on many different ethnicities, there is a conversation in African, I guess you could say, cosmology about character, right? As opposed to religiosity, which is outside of you, going to this church. No, character building is like, to put it in Ifa terms, it's like building your ache, your power. And so he is doing that instead of pumping them up with religious ideology. He's talking about building character, and that's very important to understand. Some people found that controversial because it's like, oh, why are you saying he's not religious? Listen, if he was religious, you guys will see in chapter 4 how he talks about Christianity in Africa and how it's being used and weaponized. But in the context of this chapter, you can see, what did he use the chapel for? He used the chapel to talk about a very traditional African concept, right? Which is to build one's character. So you got all the points. That's all I'm good. That's my 2 cents. And it's always just honorable, and just I'm honored that you all get a lot of it, because I never have a problem with anyone disagreeing, but I do always have a problem with being misunderstood. And so I think Washington was misunderstood. And I guess for me, my biggest objective in writing this was that, one, this belongs to our people. In many ways, people see this as a book about Washington, but it's also a book about us, right? How he served us, African people. Okay. And that is, I guess the most important thing when whenever Washington comes up, it becomes this Du Bois, Washington, this one, that one. And it's like, no, who served us well? And that's who we should praise and try to, venerate, right? The spirit that allowed them to honor us in our plight, in our continuous struggle, And so I always hope that people get that I'm not, I'm not really in the ideological debate about Washington and Du Bois and all those other figures of his time. I'm more so in a discourse about who served us well, and then let us model this. So.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Wright. And someone in the chat, this is a really good brother. Africa the Great. He, this brother always supports, and he asked if you have a Cash App, Doc. And people in the chat, they're like, I'm getting her book. So folks are saying they're giving your book. They're thanking you. They want your book, and people want to know your Cash App. And shout out to Brother Africa the Great. Peace to you, beloved, and thank you, Brother Africa the Great, for always supporting this brother. Brother T, he donated 5 of Baba Mwali Mubarudi's books, Identity. He sent 5 of them. He said he bought 5 and just said, I'm going to donate them. You do what you want to do with them. Always sending Cash Apps. So, Brother Africa the Great, I do appreciate, just your support, brother, and the work that you're doing. But what is your Cash App, Dr. Wright? What is your Cash App?
I'm here. So my Cash App, I've never been asked my Cash App before. So I guess that's a blessing. Thank you. It's $ Tyrene Wright. So it's just my name. $ Tyrene, Tyrene, and then Wright, WRIGHT.
Okay, let me throw that on the screen. All right. Doc, make sure I have it on the screen now, Doc. Make sure that that's the right one now.
Okay, I don't want people... wait, yeah. Let me double check it. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Let me check it right now. Hold on.
So family, she's going to check, because I don't want you all sending money and somebody be a happy camper, Brother T, like, thanks. Where are these Cash Apps coming from?
Right. Okay. Hold on. Let me see. I don't know if you can hear me, but okay. Yes. So... Yes. It's $ and my name, capital T, little y, RENE, and then
capital T,
WRIGHT. So that you're so right about that, right? Like somebody
they say thank you. Hold on, here we go.
And yeah. So and then the other question was, yes, I have books on hand, so go ahead, please. Get them. I sent some books yesterday. I saw someone named Richard Sheffield. He said he's waiting on his book. I know his name because his book went out yesterday.
Beautiful.
So I actually teach an international class on Pan-Africanism, and I taught that, and before I can finish, I'm already sending books out. So
but Doc, let me ask you a question before you go. At the bottom of page 46, you put a quote there, and it says the term Tuskegee model for development referred not only to industrial education, but to the, in quotes, general policy of Black development associated with Washington and his institute, namely in the submission to duly constituted white authority. Now, is this something that he wrote? Or is this something that someone else said about it?
What does it say at the end of the page? Does it because everything is
footnoted? Oh yeah. You have it just says West Tuskegee model, page 371.
Okay, so that is Michael O. West. And Michael O. West is one of the brave historians who wrote an article long before I did this work on Tuskegee and Liberia, and the connection between the two and Washington's role in Liberia, as well as some of the ideas being utilized in Liberia. And so that is a quote. The quote is from Michael O. West. And if you look in the references of the book, then you will see at the end of the book, you will see his full article at the back of the book
Right.
there.
And so he's saying here it's a general policy, but to the general policy of Black development associated with Washington and his institute, namely, and the submission to duly constituted white authority. So he's just saying that this is what they perceive the Tuskegee
That's
model
the
to be.
perception
That's the
at the
perception,
time.
right? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
the perception at the time, because this is the thing. Washington was a master of double speak. And then when you get into chapter 4, which is, I definitely want to chime in there, and I'll come in when you start, because it's very complicated. Well, not complicated, but it's a very hefty chapter. And it deals with some of these very things, like what was the impact? I alluded to it in this chapter, but I get into it in depth about what does the Atlanta Compromise, well, AKA, right, the Atlanta Compromise, but it's really the Southern Cotton States exposition speech that people know. What that said to the international world, and like I said, I heard you speak on it, and I do allude to it, the impact that it would have. On one level, it's like, galvanizing support for African labor within the United States and propagandizing against European immigration and competition for laboring jobs and industries. However, we have to recognize that it appealed, right, to not just Southern racists, but international racists of the colonial brand and colonial administrator brand, right? And so what Michael O. West is talking about is that duality, that for people who wanted to buy into that Washington represented a particular faction of people who acquiesced to white domination, then at many times it does play that way. However, for those who actually dig in, right, they realize that it's not quite that. For example, it'll come up again, this white American Midwestern philanthropist, capital venturist, who is in the Sudan, and what he is reading the Tuskegee model in Washington's position the same way. And so he individually and personally writes Booker T. Washington. And then when you see Washington's response to him, there's complete clarity. And he asked Washington, hey, I want to, colonize the Negro in Sudan. And Washington responds to him like, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, good luck with your venture, but I am not in favor of colonizing the Negro anywhere. And I think I've said that before, but you get to see it in writing, because this is Washington's own response, not from a third party, not from it. This is his. I see in the collection, you can see this man's letter to him, and then you can see Washington's response to the man. Okay. And it's like, well, I'm sorry that you're mistaken, but I'm not interested in colonizing the Negro anywhere, and I'm not going to help you. So there's that duality, and it is a double-edged sword, but you have to, once again, put it in the context of the times. Could he say, I'm doing something so powerful for African people? Could he just put it on Front Street? The other response would be that they would have leveled the place, period. It wouldn't have been any questions about it, right? Like, oh, really? You're telling us what you're up to? So he's playing this very dangerous and sophisticated game, to a point where he does have so many whites convinced that he is non-threatening and such a possibly impotent force, that when Thomas Dixon writes what he wrote in the Philadelphia Saturday Post, nothing happens, right? I mean, Thomas Dixon is a well-known figure at that time. He airs Washington out in the only way that people can air someone out at that time, in the press.
In the press.
And they could have rode on Tuskegee and killed everybody,
Mm.
like, and so, but that did not happen. There was no backlash that I could find as a response to what Thomas Dixon, who had an ongoing vendetta with Booker T. Washington. There was no, I couldn't find any backlash for what he wrote. And he probably was very angry, like, listen, I'm letting you guys know what this guy's up to. And yes, there was, there's tremendous amount of truth in what Thomas Dixon was saying. Washington is not sterile. He's not teaching them to just, put their head down and get engaged in the industries. He's teaching them to be masters of men, to own and operate. You understand? Buy and plant their own fields, all of that. So there is great truth in it. It's just too bad that he had to be the one to say it. And we, some of us got it, but some of us still don't get it. I saw someone in the chat said,
she's gone. Dr. Wright, you're breaking up. Was that Dr. It's Brother T? Is this on my end or her end, Brother T? You got to unmute. It's on her end. Okay. Dr. Wright. She's probably driving and going through a bad area.
No. It's someone was trying to call me and I had to reject the call. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but you're still staticky. Yeah, your Brother T said just a little bit. It sound like a computer, like it's like a computer sound with a little bit of static. You want to go out and come back in, Doc, or?
You can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
No, it sounds bad, Doc.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to sign out. I'm going to go. But thank you all. I don't think you can hear me.
No, we can hear a little bit. Oh, did it just went to see? It was her. It was probably her connection, and it sounded like she's driving. And Brother T, how you get these bad areas, and then, but I'm just, I appreciate Doc coming in, and I'm like, how cool is that to have a conversation? You're reading the book, and the author drops in,
right,
tell you what they were trying to get the real viewer to understand, or the reader to understand. And what I love, Brother T, is that she was like, hey, you all are on point. She said, I listened to the discussions that you're having on my book, and you all are catching the points that I'm trying to make. And so, Dr. Wright, we appreciate you, your work. We appreciate your words and you stopping in and checking on the discussions. And please join us next week. And Brother T, if you can, try to remind me to make sure I send her the link so that at the beginning of the discussion that she tunes in. Brother Shimshu, if you want to get on here, Brother Shimshu, just say the word. I'll send you the link, brother. I think you're in the book club group chat on Facebook. And so if you want to come on in, Brother Shimshu, we would love to have you. All right, family, I'll be back live this week. I did take a little break last week, Brother T, because the week before, one of my young guys said, Doc, you were pumping out interviews like mixtapes. So I said, I'm a chill for a little bit and I, get my voice together. And I did. And so I'll be back this week to touch on a few things, to talk about identity, to talk about, I'm going to do a review, a review on a panel discussion that I had with Fox. I'm also going to review a discussion that I had with Revolt TV. So I'll be back live, this family. So be sure that if you haven't subscribed to my channel, that you subscribe, hit the notification bell so that when I go live, you get an alert to say, hey, she's live, and you can come on in and join the discussion. Brother T, do you have any closing words, brother?
Excellent discussion. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and joining us with your comments in the chat. It's definitely helpful, and it's good to see that people are being responsive to what we are doing. And I appreciate you, and I hope to see you next week.
All right, family, you heard it. Have a black-tastic week. Peace and love.